A listener production.
Hi, Natarsha Belling with you and welcome to the afternoon edition of The Briefing. Coming up in our deep dive, we unpack exactly what ICE agents are and the growing concerns over their powers in the US after the shooting death of a mother in her car in Minneapolis. So exactly who are these agents? Who do they get their orders from? And what training or experience do they have? All those details in just a moment. But first, let's check the afternoon headlines this Monday, the 12th of January. The Prime Minister has recalled federal Parliament for next week to introduce new hate speech legislation and gun laws in the wake of the Bondi terror attack last month. There was pressure on Anthony Albanese to act earlier, but the PM says his government needed more time to ensure the changes to hate speech, gun and visa laws were well planned to prevent any possible legal challenges in the future. Mr Albanese said the changes will see penalties for hate crime offences increase, with a new offence for inciting hatred in order to intimidate or harass. The Home Affairs Minister will also be able to list organisations as prohibited hate groups and more easily cancel or refuse a visa for people intent on spreading hate.
The terrorists at Bondi Beach had hatred in their minds, but guns in their hands. This law will deal with both, and we do need to deal with both of these issues.
The heroic Sydney police officer who shot dead the attacker that stabbed and killed shoppers at Bondi Junction Westfield has been diagnosed with cancer. Amy Scott put her own life on the line to stop Joel Cauchi in April 2024 after he killed 6 people and injured many more. Amy, who is also a mother of 2 young boys, has been diagnosed with a rare and aggressive form of breast cancer. Here is New South Wales Premier Chris Minns.
She's a genuine, bona fide Australian hero, someone that we owe a huge debt of gratitude to, not just because of her heroic actions in Bondi Junction of a couple of years ago, but also she's been an inspiration to the exact same officers that attended the terrorism event on the 14th of December. She is so important for New South Wales Police and our community. I'm devastated to hear this news. I mean, if anyone deserves a break, it's Amy, and we just wish her the very best. She's an absolute champion.
New South Wales Police Legacy has now launched an appeal to support Amy and her young family. And Australian actress Rose Byrne has won her first Golden Globe, taking home Best Performance by a Female Actor in a Musical or Comedy for her role in If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You. The actor thanking her mum and dad in Australia and her husband who couldn't make the awards ceremony.
I want to thank my husband Bobby Cannavale, who couldn't be here because we're getting a bearded dragon and he went to a reptile expo in New Jersey. So thank you, baby.
Timothée Chalamet took home Best Actor in a Musical or Comedy for Marty Supreme. One battle after another, and adolescents dominated the Golden Globes with 4 wins each. Now it's time for our deep dive with US political expert David Smith on the rise of ICE agents in the US. Their actions are now in question, with protests growing across America after the shooting death of 37-year-old mother of 3 Renee Good in her car in Minneapolis. David, thanks so much for joining us. Let's start at the beginning. Exactly who are these ICE agents? Because they're actually not police officers, are they?
No, they're not. So Immigration and Customs Enforcement is an agency of the federal government that was formed as part of the Department of Homeland Security after the 9/11 attacks. The original purpose of ICE, like all of these Department of Homeland Security agencies, was really counter-terrorism. There was concern that one of the things that allowed terrorism to happen in the United States was allowing people who shouldn't have been in the country in the first place to be there. But under the Trump administration, and even earlier than that, ICE's purpose has instead really been focused on deportation of illegal immigrants Often that's illegal immigrants who have some kind of criminal background or have faced charges. This was during the Obama administration. This was really the focus. It was getting rid of people with a criminal background. But during the second Trump administration in particular, we've seen this far broader mandate to really try to deport as many people as possible who are in the United States illegally.
So, David, in regards to actually where they get these powers from, who are they getting their orders from? I'm talking about the ICE agents. And exactly what powers do they have?
So they get their powers from the Department of Homeland Security. The Secretary for Homeland Security is currently Kristi Noem, who is the former governor of North Dakota. So they can't undertake normal policing action, but they do have far more extensive powers to take people into custody than normal police officers would. They don't actually require warrants to take people into custody. They do require warrants to enter people's homes, but they spend a lot of time in public areas, really just literally taking people off the streets who they regard as suspicious. In order to actually deport someone, that person would have to have been found to be in the United States illegally, but there's nothing really to stop ICE detaining people in the first place. ICE also has the power to detain protesters, to detain people that it sees as interfering with their actions. When it detains protesters, if they're US citizens, they're not supposed to take them to immigration detention facilities, but there have been a number of cases where American citizens have been taken to these facilities. Immigration detention facilities are often worse than normal jails in the United States, and normal jails aren't great to begin with. People who are in immigration detention really have fewer rights than American citizens who are in jails because of the fact that the ICE deportation campaign is now really being escalated. A lot of immigration detention facilities are really overcrowded, and there are some quite horrific stories emerging from those facilities of the kinds of conditions there and the kinds of treatment that they get at the hands of ICE officers. Historically, there haven't been a huge number of ICE officers, only around 20,000 or less for most of the duration of ICE. But the Trump administration has assigned $160 billion of the federal budget to ICE. So there's an enormous hiring spree going on. That includes $50,000 to $100,000 signing bonuses. The training time to enter ICE has been reduced from 20 weeks, now down to 8 weeks. So what they get is training in firearms. They do get a bit of training in immigration law. They're supposed to be trained in de-escalation, but this is really a very short training period for federal law enforcement officers who have so much power. Another thing that ICE have become very well known for is the fact that they wear masks. Now, that is very unusual for law enforcement, even for federal law enforcement in the United States. And certainly a lot of states and a lot of cities are not happy about that. They just don't see this as something that law enforcement should be doing. Law enforcement, certain standards of transparency are required. Now, the Department of Homeland Security has responded by saying that attacks on ICE agents are what really justifies them wearing masks, and they cite figures of increases in 1,300% of assaults, 8,000% in deaths. But you've got to remember that these numbers, they sound spectacular, but they're starting from extremely low baseline rates in the first place, like single digits. They say that ICE officers are afraid of being doxxed, that is, of people finding out who they are and putting them in danger. But really, all law enforcement officers face this risk. Certainly, critics of ICE say that this is really to just completely reduce transparency and to make them more terrifying and intimidating.
David, you mentioned earlier these ICE agents were established after the September 11 terrorist attacks, but I understand they actually have had a long history previous to the Trump administration this time round of being quite controversial and embroiled in very, very, very serious allegations.
Yeah, during the Obama administration, there were more than 1,000 complaints by detainees of sexual assault by ICE agents. We have to remember there were a lot of deportations during the Obama administration. Donald Trump so far has not carried out the number of deportations that Barack Obama did, which was 3 million. Obama was known by critics as the deporter-in-chief. And during that period, there were a lot of people who complained about the abuses that were inflicted on them by ICE agents. And the worry is that because immigration detainees are among the least powerful people in the United States, they're not citizens, they don't have rights, the same rights as citizens do, then they don't have the right to be there in the first place, that they were particularly vulnerable to abuse by ICE agents. So there has actually been a lot of concern about ICE for a long time. And during the 2010s, especially during Trump's first term, there was actually quite a popular slogan in the Democratic Party for abolishing ICE. And that almost became a litmus test at one point for Democratic candidates. However, Democrats have really retreated from that position because they don't want to be seen as soft on illegal immigration or as soft on law enforcement in general. They believe that the slogan, defund the police, came back to hurt them. So Democrats have backed away from that position. But ICE has been really controversial for a long time now, even before the first Trump presidency.
David, the spotlight has firmly gone back on these ICE agents and exactly what powers they've got, what lack of training. Some people are arguing that it's very concerning. And this, of course, spiked with the death of this 37-year-old Minneapolis woman, Renee Nicole Good, who was shot dead by one of these ICE agents. Exactly what legal rights do any Americans have with this almost mandate, unchecked mandate that these ICE agents now have?
Well, Americans do have the legal right not to be executed in the street. And the ICE handbook, which is similar to other law enforcement handbooks, specifies that firearms should only be used against suspects when officers are in fear of their life, in fear of a really imminent danger that the suspect proposes. They don't have the power to kill people just because they disobey orders. And the ICE instructions explicitly say that firearms shouldn't be fired at somebody who's operating a vehicle unless they're in imminent danger of getting run over. Now, the killing of Renee Good has been extremely controversial because the Trump administration keeps claiming that not only was the officer's life in danger, but that Renee Good was, in their words, a domestic terrorist who had weaponized her car and was using it as a weapon. And so therefore, the officer feared not only for his life, but for the life of the officers around him. Now, the video footage that came out of that, and there's a lot of video footage available, it really doesn't seem to show that that officer's life was in danger. Even the video that was released by a conservative news site, which was then reposted by the Department of Homeland Security and by the Vice President, where they seem to be suggesting this shows that the officer was run over. It doesn't show that. But what we can see from the other video, from the original video that was released, was that at that point, that officer was standing to the side of the car. He wasn't in front of it anymore, and that he dropped the phone in order to fire the weapon. That's what appears to happen. It's still not entirely clear, but there are investigations going on into it. But another complicating and interesting detail that has come out, that's been publicised by the Department of Homeland Security, is that they say that the officer who fired the shots last year, in the middle of last year, actually had a very serious incident where he was trying to apprehend a suspect who was an illegal alien who was wanted on sexual assault of a minor charges. And the officer actually tried to reach into a car to unlock it, and the suspect drove off, dragged him 100 metres down the street, resulting in very serious injuries. And the officer gave testimony about this in court, describing on that occasion the real fear of his life that he was in, and his sense of what a dangerous job it was doing. Now, you can understand for someone who's been through an incident like that, he might have a really elevated sense of threat when it comes to vehicles and the potential threat that they pose. So it will be it would under normal circumstances be up to the courts to decide what happened. But this investigation into this incident is now being handled only by the FBI. The federal government clearly doesn't trust the state authorities in Minnesota because the governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, has really come out very strongly against this shooting. So is the mayor of Minneapolis, and he's told ICE to get out of Minnesota. So the federal government's made it clear they don't trust the Minnesota government.
So, David, from your position, we know that there are great concerns, especially from local authorities after the death of this mother, that if the FBI is investigating, it won't be a transparent investigation. How do you think this plays out in regards to there seems to be this unchecked power, with some even alleging these agents are President Trump's personal militia with unchecked powers?
Yeah, certainly if an FBI investigation results in no kind of disciplinary action whatsoever, that is going to send a signal that ICE agents can operate with complete impunity. This has already been the signal that certain people in the White House have been sending. Stephen Miller, Trump's political advisor, has basically said that ICE agents who are out there, they're operating with the protection of the White House. They're operating with the complete protection of the federal government. They really want to seem to send this signal to protesters that you are completely fair game for ICE officers, as are illegal immigrants. There was another fatal shooting of 2 people in Portland, Oregon, not long after this incident. So it's very worrying for protesters and for opponents of ICE, what a non-transparent, ineffective investigation could bring. And I think that we're likely to see an escalation of protests against ICE and also potentially violent actions against protesters.
We really appreciate your analysis, as always. Thanks so much, David.
My pleasure.
That was Associate Professor David Smith from the US Studies Centre. And that's it for this episode of the afternoon edition of The Briefing. We'll be back in your feed tomorrow morning with a deep dive on the deadly protests in Iran. And we'd love you to subscribe or follow us on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast. I'm Natarsha Belling. Thanks for your company.